Yesterday I explained the wiring for the 801 controller. So this morning I've just plugged in my 701. The 701 is a lot more expensive than the 801, a heck of a lot more expensive, and its only real feature is the fact that it actually has a 7-day programmer in it. The wiring's a lot simpler, or rather the wiring for this model is a lot simpler. This model doesn't have the diagnostic function. They are available with diagnostics, and it's worth bearing that in mind if you're looking at them on second hand on eBay. It's pretty obvious, you can tell. This one's only got 4 wires. The yellow wire is the heater on off signal from the controller. The grey and red wire is the temperature sensor in the controller, and that is what modulates the fan once the required temperature is met. In this case, the wire is actually coloured brown for the reference earth connection, but the standard colouring that Eberspacher use for the reference earth is brown and white. But the controller is just brown. So potentially you could probably wire that brown wire to a standard earth, but I tend to prefer to use the reference earth that comes from the circuit board in the actual heater. It's just, I guess they've had problems with noise or spike or interference or something using the standard earth, so they use this clean supply which is filtered. And then lastly, the red wire is the permanent 12 volt feed. What I don't like about these controllers is this silly segmented display. You can't easily determine what temperature that's set to. I have no idea what the temperature is in this van at the moment. I'd have to get a thermometer and actually look at it. It's a bit hit and miss. It's just like the rotary controls. You end up winding it up and down until you get the vehicle to a comfortable temperature without really knowing what you're aiming for. And then the next day, if the temperature is massively different outside, you'll have to slide it up and down a bit to try and get it to compensate. It's not brilliant, but other than the fact that, as I said, I don't like this method of increasing the temperature, it has got this really useful function of being a 7-day timer. So in this fan I will probably have the red and brown permanently connected, because obviously that maintains the clock and everything else, and I will put the yellow and the grey and red wire on a 4-way changeover switch so that I can toggle between this controller and the 801. The 801 I can use during the day, in the evening, so we can maintain the temperature more precisely, and this we just use to turn the heating on in the morning if we need it. What you'll notice also is the display is toggling between the time, which is currently 10 o'clock this morning, and C45. By default, when this thing turns on, it will only run for an hour and then turn off, and I've had it going for 15 minutes. You can probably hear the noise I get from my heater is predominantly the air intake there. I've got a D4 Plus, and the D4 Pluses are noticeably noisier than the D2s and the D4s when they're on their lowest modulation setting, and this is currently modulated down to its lowest speed. And the other noise you can probably hear is the clunk in the pump. My pump in this van is quite noisy. In WAS it's less obtrusive. I will have to modify the way this pump under the van is mounted on the chassis to reduce the clonking noise, because the clonking noise is more noticeable than the fan, especially once I've got the bulkhead in place, that air intake. And the reason the air intake's there is, as I mentioned about the 801, my heater's underneath the floor, so there's about 6 feet of plumbing outside, or pipework rather, outside that goes to the heater. And that's one of the reasons why I like the 801. The 801 replaces the sensor, the temperature sensor, within the heater itself. Whereas using this 701 controller, the modulation is not going to be as precise, because the air being drawn in by that pipe there is running under the floor, outside, and therefore it's being cooled down before it gets to the heater. So the temperature sensor that's in the heater under the floor would be getting a slightly different reading to the two sensors that I've got in the 801, wherever the sensor's gone. There, the little thing on the left there. And that just, you know, I wouldn't go and say it makes a massive difference, but I just feel that actually being able to set the temperature that needs to be met and tell the heater the temperature that's being achieved allows the electronics in the heater to better regulate the temperature in the van, and also more importantly it controls the noise. Whereas today, right now, that's modulation away quite happily to itself. It's slowed right down. How well it manages to maintain a consistent temperature I don't know. So if I ramp this up now to something crazy, I have no idea what temperature that is, but it's more than it currently is. There's a bit of hysteresis in the way these controllers and way these heaters react, and it takes a while, a few seconds. There it goes. You can now hear the pump speeding up and the fan speeding up. So it takes a while for the heater to react to any input. It's the same with all the controllers. That makes it a little bit harder to accurately set the temperature. You really, as you saw, I ramped that quite a way up. Normally on this, I'd just do it 1 bar at a time, let the heater react and stabilise, and see what the temperature is. Otherwise, you're up and down like a yo-yo. It's not a perfect system for temperature control. But that being said, it works. The van's nice and warm in here, and I will be using both of these controllers in this build almost certainly, especially as soon as I bought them. But 701, just to wrap up, the cheap version or the simpler version, 4 wires. More complex version has the 5th wire for the diagnostics, but it doesn't have the 6th wire for the additional temperature sensor. So there you go.